Hey there, everyone. This week in the podcast, we talked about some off-grid cooking options and some of the precautions that we have to take. And I wanted to do a quick video here, kind of a recap of the show. We went through quite a bit more in the show, so make sure and if you get a chance, take a listen to that. But there's quite a few things that we need to think about, as well as a few things some options that we'll have and some options that we won't have. You know, in an off-grid situation, people are going to be more hungry, way more hungry than they are right now. So it's not going to be just go out and cook something. We're going to have to think about some of the precautions we're going to need to take to not, have the neighbors coming to our door asking for food. In the podcast, we talked about it like, right now we make, you watch the movies and you make noise, the zombies come running. Well, in a situation like that, the zombies are going to be people, and if they smell food, if they smell fire, they're going to know that that's their best option for getting something. So in a situation like that, there's a few precautions we need to take. We need to think about the smell that we're putting off, we need to think about the smoke signals we're sending off, and we need to think about the trash removal as well. With the smell that we're putting off, if you're cooking outdoors on a grill, something like that, the odds are we're not going to have a lot of meat. Maybe in the initial stages we might, but eventually it's going to be coming down to canned foods, foods you have stored, stuff like that, long-term food storage that aren't going to be the really fatty foods that give off a lot of smell. But at the same time, just lighting your barbecue grill is going to give off that backyard grill smell. So you might not be cooking anything that's giving off any smell, but that smell of that grill is going to be wafting around and kind of alerting the zombies. Along with that, when you light a fire, any sort of wood or anything, it's going to send off smoke signals, and those people are going to be coming around looking for food when they see, big old smokestacks coming up. Now, in that type of situation, if like where we live here in Colorado, it's going to be cold in the winter and hot in the summertime. So depending on what time of year, there might be fires anyway. So there might be, we're going to have to heat the home, so we're going to have to do it somehow. But be careful of those smoke signals. That's why we have the blaze charcoal grills that I'll talk about in a bit that don't give off any smoke at all. And also the trash removal. If you need to, first off, for sanitation reasons, you need to worry about your trash removal. But if you've got old tin cans, old boxes of spaghetti, or anything like that, just kind of in your trash, where people, if they're coming around your house or whatever, and they look at that and they say, hey, this dude's got food. We need to hop in his house and get what he's got because they have food. So that's another thing. Maybe bury it. I don't know that burning it is going to be a great option, but if you've got a fire lit already because you have to keep warm, maybe that's what you need to do. Now, before I get into the different options we have, I want to quickly cover, how our diet is going to change. And we talked about a lot of detail in the podcast with this, but our diets are going to change because if the grid goes down, there goes our refrigeration. Unless we have a generator or solar power to keep that up and running, that, there goes our refrigeration. Now here in Colorado, maybe where you live, if it's wintertime, that might be okay. If it's summertime, you're going to have to think about that. But, if there is no refrigeration and it's not cold outside, all of that food in your refrigerator is eventually going to be gone. And that brings up something we talked about in the podcast is, a lot of people are going to be having the neighborhood barbecues because they're going to be thinking the grid's coming back on in a couple of days, everything is going to be fine. But do you participate in that? And we kind of went both ways with this where, maybe you do participate, but you give off the impression that you're in the same boat as everybody else. This is going to really suck. Hopefully, everything comes back on in the next couple of days. So if you do, that might be a way to kind of extend the olive branch and let everybody know that, hey, you know what, if something does last longer than that, they're like, they don't have anything. They were just over here the other day. They're in the same boat as us. So thinking about stuff like that. Also your diet, you've got to think about, kind of look through your food storage and everything and think about what you will have, say, after 2 days. All that stuff in the refrigerator, all that stuff in the freezer is probably going to be gone. So what is your diet going to consist of? Now, as far as cooking in an off-the-grid situation, there's quite a few options that we might have available, that we do have available. There's also quite a few options that we need to think about all these precautions that I talked about and decide whether or not it's a good idea to cook some of this stuff. Now, the first thing that comes to mind, and it's really not a cooking option, but it's long-term food storage, like the legacy foods that we sell at the SHTF shop. They're really convenient, they're easy to store, they have a super long shelf life, and all you need to do is figure out a way to boil water, and you can basically cook these. They don't give off a lot of aroma. Granted, you'll probably be able to smell it inside your home, but as far as attracting the neighbors, the zombies, not going to give off a lot of smell. So those are a good option. Just, if everything's at its heightened level and your security is of the utmost importance, maybe that's a good idea to go with some of those. Now, kind of along the same lines as that is with indoor cooking, if you're at a heightened level of security, is there's not a lot of options when you're thinking about indoor stuff. So sterno fuel is a good way to heat up food. It's not going to really cook food. It won't boil water or anything like that. But if you do have some of this long-term food, you could, it would take a little bit longer because you can't boil it, but you could do it. You could heat up cans of soup, or if you had anything, other stuff canned, it will heat that stuff up. It just won't necessarily boil it. It will cook it over a period of time, but it won't boil it. Camp stoves, Coleman stoves, a lot of us probably have these. Camp stoves, Coleman stoves, the propane stoves, all of those are a good idea because they don't give off a lot of smell. Again, these smells, the smell from that, if you're cooking a steak, say you went out and got yourself a squirrel or something, it might put off some smell because of that meat that you're cooking. But if you're just boiling stuff, these are a good option to reduce that smell and reduce that smoke. Now, I have heard that you could use these indoors, although they do need a lot of ventilation because they do give off carbon monoxide. So kind of the same theory as keeping your garage door open when your car is running. As long as your garage door opens, fine, but you don't want to close that door and be asphyxiated with all those fumes. I also mentioned the grills that Expedition and Research and I have put together, and these are great because they take about a minute to light, or a minute per brick. And then once they're lit, they give off no smoke, they give off no smell. So kind of on the same lines as a Coleman grill, it depends on what you're cooking, but they're not going to give off any smell. Now, these aren't, none of these really are the only option you should have. All of these are different things that you can have in case your propane runs out, your kerosene runs out, all of that different stuff. So, having a bunch of different options is always a good idea. But these blaze grills are a really good idea, and they're also cool. I've got one that I just keep in my truck in case something happens. It's all contained in one box. I've got the grills, I've got the matches, I've got the charcoal. As long as I've got a place to set it up, I can get a fire or a stove lit, and I'll actually make a fire from the charcoal bricks themselves. Now, another one is the propane grills. We all probably have propane grills, and these are a great idea. Maybe get a can or two extra of the propane. A little bit expensive. I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks to get the can itself, the tank itself. But get a couple extra of those. Those will last quite a while, and if you have a few of those, you can extend that time. But like I said, in a situation where you're not going to be giving off smells or anything like that, an outdoor grill might not be the best option. But as far as cost efficiency and storing fuel, it is one of the better options. One of my favorite options with the cooking smells, the smoke signals, and all of that in mind is the All-American Sun Oven. And these are absolutely fantastic because you can cook just about anything with these. You can purify water. It will boil hot water and purify. Comes with it's called a WAPI, W-A-P-I. I'm not quite sure what that stands for, but it tells you when your water is purified. You can boil eggs, you can cook bread, you can put your Dutch oven in there. You can do so much in a sun oven. As long as you've got the sun available, you'll be able to do that. Now, in Oregon, Washington, areas like that, might not be such a great idea, but out where we live, 70-80% of the days we have sunlight, and even if without direct sunlight, it will still work, just won't get as hot. Hot plates are another one that might be a good option for indoors, but to me they're really not a good option because they take up a lot of energy. You would have to run your generator, or even if you have a solar setup, you would have to run that, but they take a lot of wattage. So it's, there's just better options available when it comes to cooking indoors. Like I said, the sterno won't boil anything, and this will, but it's kind of that trade-off. If you're one of the lucky ones that has a wood stove in your house, good for you. These are pretty expensive though for a good one, and you also have to think about if you want to put one in, you've got to think about the insurance on your home. But they're a great idea. You can heat your home as well as cook off the grid. The only thing with these is if you're using them, it sends a smoke signal straight up. But at the same time, if you're in the middle of winter and you're using it to heat your home, the odds are a lot of other people are going to be having fires as well. So you're going to be, kind of masked a little bit, and it's just going to smell like wood. It's going to smell like everybody else. So, but a great option. This is something that we want to get in the future. Right now, we don't have one, but getting it put in. But first of all, buying the wood stove and then actually getting it put in and getting approved and all that is a little bit bigger deal than we can handle right now. One thing I'm going to do a review on here in the near future is a thermal cooker, and these are pretty cool because you can basically, instead of like legacy food stores, you have to heat it up. You bring the water to a boil and then you have to heat it up for 10 minutes. If you could just take the energy it takes to bring the water to a boil and then transfer that into one of these solar cookers, and it retains that heat, you're saving a lot of fuel right there. Even nowadays, you instead of having your crock pot on all day long, you could bring something to a boil, heat it up, put it in this thermal cooker, and let it sit there. I'm going to try these out and see how well they actually work. I've heard great things about them, but I want to try it out for myself. So thermal cookers are also a good idea. Another thing with thermal cookers too is that you can heat up water and you can have that water stay warm for a long period of time. That way when you need to wash dishes, wash your hands, clean stuff, you don't have to worry about bringing water to a boil again. You've got it sitting there ready to go, and it'll last 5-6 hours. And then there's also, the candles, kind of along the lines of sterno. They're not going to give off as much heat as sterno though, so it's going to take a lot longer. But you know what, tea light candles, there's a lot of DIY things that you can do with different stoves and tea light candles and the terracotta pots. They will heat up. Say you need to heat up a can of beans or something like that. They will do it. It's going to take a while, but they will do it. But this is one of those last resorts. You might as well have some, sterno fuel or something like that. And then they also make these kerosene lanterns that actually have a pot on the top that you can cook with them, which is a pretty neat idea. You can heat up, I don't know that they would boil water. I don't have one of these. I assume they would. I assume it would be enough heat. But you could heat some stuff up in a small pot, stuff like that. And at the same time, you're lighting your house. So pretty cool idea. Anyway, that's kind of it. I went a little bit long on this, but we went through quite a bit more detail in the podcast about all of these things and the precautions you need to take. Spent about an hour on it, so it's a lot more detail. But make sure and check that podcast out, and we'll talk to everybody later.